Thanks so much for joining us as we continue our study of the revelation of Jesus Christ. We're still in chapters 2 and 3, and we're looking at the 7 churches of Revelation. So when we visited Pergamum last time, we were at the top of a 1,500-foot high foothill. Today, we visit Thyatira that was on a large level plain. It was an important industrial and commercial center. There were many guilds for different tradesmen in Thyatira. And to be in a guild, well, there was a lot of temptation to compromise your morals. And there was a lady Jesus called Jezebel who was leading the compromise. The teaching for Thyatira is in your notes, and the video teaching comes to you straight from the ruins of Thyatira. Check this out. Well, thanks for joining us here in Thyatira as we continue the tour of the 7 churches of Revelation. We're standing here in Thyatira in an old church, a basilica. There were not buildings back in the time that Revelation was written. That came later in the 300s, but this would have been one of the churches here. There are not a lot of ruins found in Thyatira because a modern city has built over it, but we're standing in a few of the ruins that exist. And Thyatira is an amazing story, amazing letter. Every time Jesus sends a letter to one of the churches, a real historical church that represents the churches in history and the challenges they had, he describes himself, and then he praises the church, and then he'll address the problem, then he will tell the solution, and then he'll let them know the consequences for obeying or disobeying. And here in Thyatira, it's interesting because there were many guilds. This was a very industrial city, an industrial center. And there were a lot of guilds, coppersmith, those who were tailors, those who did work with metals, and those who did work with purple dye. Remember, Lydia was from Thyatira, and Paul met her in Philippi, and she became the first convert in Europe, although she's from Thyatira, first convert in Europe, and invited Paul and his companions back to her house to stay and for hospitality and to have church there. So she was a very wealthy woman from Thyatira. And the guilds were very strong. In order to become a member of a guild, you had to do 7 years apprenticeship. Then after that, you were a journeyman, and that meant you had to go find your own business and build your business. And when you had done that successfully, you could be a member of the guild. The guilds were kind of like a social club or a civic club, sometimes just a religious club, and they would meet and have banquets. They would have banquets in the pagan temples around here. And to honor that pagan god where they were eating, they would serve food. They would offer food to the idols. And then they would have a meal. There would be a lot of drinking and a lot of sexual immorality. So that was a problem. So here was a person, let's say they had a business, and now they became a Christian. Now they have to be a part of the guild. If they're not a part of the guild, they don't participate, they lose their job, they lose their income. Just think of the dilemma that these Christians had to face. By the way, not different than a lot of dilemmas Christians have to face today. So Jesus said there was this person that he says, the prophetess Jezebel, she's teaching a heresy. And what we think Jezebel was doing, Jezebel is from the name of the queen in the Old Testament, the wife of Ahab, a wicked king in Israel. Jesus doesn't say her name, he just says she's like Jezebel. She's leading people astray in sexual immorality and in idolatry, meat offered to idols. She says, let's fix the issue. We'll take pagan worship and we'll take Christian worship and we'll put it together, synchronism. And here's a way you can stay as a member of the guild, still continue to be a tanner or a leather worker, keep your job, keep your income, and you can also be a Christian. But Jesus said it doesn't work like that. And so when you read the book of Thyatira, he has some serious consequences to this prophetess who is teaching here. In fact, he says I've asked her to repent, and she hasn't. She's had time to repent, she won't. And he said, I'm going to throw her on a bed of sickness, a severe illness. He's going to put her followers to death. And those believers who, they were true Christians, but they were giving in to her teaching, they were compromising.
He said there are going to be some consequences with you as well. He calls it great suffering, and that could be either emotional or physical. It could be persecution that's going to come to them. So Thyatira has this great story of those who were Christians, but man, it was so easy to give in to the pressures of culture and the pressures of their job. And I know that many of you listening to this have gone through the same thing. We've talked together. How do you follow hard after Jesus when my boss or my job calls me to do things that really aren't in line with his teaching? Well, Jesus at the end says, if you follow me, you're going to have all the authority, you're going to have all the strength, you're going to have everything you need. You're going to reign with me, he says at the end of this letter, and I'm going to give you the morning star. I will always give you myself, and you will have all you need. So thanks for joining us here in Thyatira.